This story is called Nyangara, and it's a story from the continent of Africa, from the Shona people in southern Africa. Once, there was a village at the foot of a mountain. Now, this village was ruled by a chief who loved his people and knew them very well, because he didn't stay by himself or away from his people. Whatever they were doing, he was always involved. So of a morning, he would be at the river, talking and singing with the women as they washed the clothes and prepared food for the day. Later in the day, he might be found climbing a ladder to help some of the men fix the thatch on a leaky roof. And in the middle of the day, after lunch, he would often be found in a circle of children playing a game. And the children were thrilled to have him because they often beat him at these games. But he was always cheerful and glad to be part of his people's activities. And in this way, he was a very good ruler because he knew them so well that he knew what they needed and what they loved. So you can imagine that one day after lunch, a couple of the grown-ups happened to meet each other and say, "Have you seen the chief? I haven't seen him today. Where is he?" Well, they were curious. It was so strange. So a couple of them went to the chief's hut. And they stood in the doorway, and there in the darkness lay the chief on his sleeping mat. And the mamas and daddies said, "Chief, what's wrong? Why are you still in bed?" Then the chief said, "Oh, I'm sick. First I'm too hot, and then I'm too cold. And when I try to sit up, my stomach goes, woo." "Oh no, that's terrible," said the mamas and daddies. "What can we do to help you?" "Well," said the chief, "you can bring me my doctor, Nyangara, the great snake who lives in the cave at the top of the mountain behind our village. Now, you will need to go up and carry him down. And to pay for his services, you must bring him a present. He loves sweet fruit juice. So you must go out into the forest and collect the fruit and squeeze the juice until you have a great pot full of sweet fruit juice. Then together you must carry it up the winding path and set it out in front of the chief's cave, Nyangara's cave. And then you must let him know that you are there. You must call him. And this is the way you must do it. Nyangara Chena, which means Nyangara, come out. And when he hears you sing that, he will come out and he will take the sweet fruit juice, and then you can carry him down the mountain and bring him to me, and he will make me well again. Oh, we will do this, Chief. We love you and we miss you. We're so sorry you are sick." And so the mamas and daddies went away, and together they went in the forest, and they gathered a great basket full of fruit. And they squeezed the juice until they filled a great clay pot with the juice. And then together they carried the heavy pot up the path until they came to the top of the mountain. And there, on the flat stones in front of the cave, they set the pot down. And some of the mamas and daddies stood on one side of the pot, and some stood on the other side. And together they called, "Nyangara Chena." And they waited and they listened, but nothing happened. So they called again, "Nyangara Chena." And now, from the back of the cave, they could hear the sound of the great snake's scales scraping against each other and then scraping against the flat stones of the floor of the cave. And if you put your hands up to your ear and rub your hands together, you can hear what that sounded like. Now slowly, slowly, the mamas and daddies knew that Nyangara was uncoiling and crawling out of the shadows and into the sunshine. And after a while, they could see him coming toward them. That great snake crawled out of the cave and along the ground in front of them through the sunshine toward the mamas and daddies. But when they saw how big he was, they were so scared that they screamed, "Ah!" and they cried, "Oh!" And they bumped into each other and they knocked over the pot of sweet fruit juice. It broke and the juice sank into the ground. The mamas and daddies all ran back down the path, down to the village, where they all each ran to their houses and crawled into their beds. Later that day and the next morning, some of the boys and girls of the village got together. They said, "Did you see the chief yesterday? He didn't come to our game circle after lunch. I wonder where he is. I don't know. Let's go find out." So the boys and girls ran to the chief's hut. And they stood there in the doorway, and they saw the chief there still on his sleeping mat. "Chief, what are you doing still in bed?" And the chief said, "Oh, I'm sick. First I'm too hot, and then I'm too cold. And when I try to sit up, my stomach goes, woo!" "Oh, we know how that feels," said the children. "That's terrible. What can we do to help you?" "Well," said the chief, "you can bring me my doctor, Nyangara, the great snake, who lives in the cave at the top of the mountain. Now, you must go together and you must bring him a present. You must bring him a great pot of sweet fruit juice. You must ask your parents to help you gather that fruit. You must go out into the forest and pick the fruit and then squeeze it until you have a great pot full of juice. And then you must carry it up the mountain and set it down in front of the cave. And then you must call him so that he knows you are there. And you must call him in a special way. Nyangara Chena." "Oh, Chief, we will do this," said the children. "We love you and we want you to be well." The children ran away and got their parents to help them gather the fruit and squeeze it until they had a pot full of juice. And then the children together carried the heavy pot up the mountain until they came to the top. And there they set the pot down in front of Nyangara's cave, and some of the children stood on one side and some stood on the other. And together they called, "Nyangara Chena." And they waited and listened, but nothing happened. So they called again, "Nyangara Chena." And now the children could hear the sound of that great snake uncoiling and crawling out from the shadows into the sunlight. Soon his great head came out of the cave toward them. And the children saw how big he was. Each one of them thought, "He is so big that he could swallow me whole in one bite." Each of the children was very much afraid. Each of them wanted to run. But each of them thought, "If I run away, who will help the chief?" So they grabbed each other's hands and they stood still as Nyangara crawled closer and closer. Nyangara crawled right up to the clay pot full of juice. He crawled up until he could rest his head on the lip of the pot, the top of it. Then he put his head down into the pot, and the children could hear him drinking the juice just like a cat drinks milk. When he had finished, he crawled back down and he spoke to the children. He said, "Thank you, that was delicious. Now what would you like me to do for you?" "Oh, please, Nyangara, may we bring you down to our chief? He is sick. Will you help him get better?" "Of course," said Nyangara. "Just line up, one behind the other, and I will crawl up onto your shoulders, and you can carry me down to the chief's hut." So the children lined up, and Nyangara crawled up the back of the last child in line, and he crawled up until he was laying against their shoulders, on the tops of their shoulders. The children each put their hands up to hold him there, and together they walked down the mountain until they came to the chief's hut. When they got there, they stood in the doorway, and Nyangara crawled down the front of the first child in line and down into the chief's hut, down next to the chief's body as he lay flat on his sleeping mat in the darkness. Now, Nyangara crawled up to the chief's feet first, and he began to give the chief the medicine that he needed. First, Nyangara licked his feet. Then he crawled a little further and he licked the chief's stomach. He crawled a little further and he licked the chief's face. First one side and then the other. Now, the chief opened his eyes. He sat up. He looked around. He saw Nyangara lying beside him. He saw the children standing in the doorway. "Oh, my dears," said the chief, "thank you so much. You brought me my doctor, Nyangara, and I feel well again. Thank you." Now, Nyangara had the children line up again, and he crawled back up onto their shoulders, and they took him back to his cave at the top of the mountain. But from that day on, whenever anyone needed Nyangara, it was always the children who brought him. And that is the story of Nyangara, the doctor snake.